Hello, everyone. My name is Idyli from therapyforme.co.uk. Today I'm here with Mags Giza, psychotherapist. Hello, Mags.
Hi.
Welcome. It's really nice to have you here today with us.
Oh, it's lovely to see you, Dilly, as always.
And we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is around the idea of, living our best life. And before we start,
Mm.
would you like to tell us a little bit about your background and your clinical experience, Max?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a psychotherapist. I've been practicing for over 10 years. I kind of offer different therapies. Some of my work is integrative, but I also drove from, and I offer that as a standalone treatment as well, CBT,
Mm-hmm.
EMDR, so the trauma work, and also interpersonal psychotherapy. So different streams, different models, but it often comes together very well in integration of therapy. But it's standalone treatments. These are also valid, obviously, interventions in themselves. So this
Mm-hmm.
is kind of what I try to work with.
Oh, brilliant. So you have a varied experience. It sounds like you work
Mm.
with trauma using EMDR. Do you work with couples as well or families using the interpersonal model?
Not at the moment. With couples, I've stopped that work a while ago. But when I do the interpersonal psychotherapy with people, very often we invite their partners or the other kind of important others in their life to attend the sessions as well, because that can be quite helpful.
Oh, great.
But a lot of the therapy happens with sort of with just us in the room, and we kind of still bring in the outside world into therapy, and the interpersonal world is included in that.
I see. I see. So my first question is, we hear quite a lot people talking about living their best life. So shall we start by thinking, what does that actually mean?
Yes, this elusive best life. Well, I suppose thinking about what it's not, because perhaps there are some myths about what it is, and we often fall for these myths. When you think about happiness in terms of sort of feeling good, it can't really last that long when we think about it in terms of feelings, and especially the good feelings. So when we think about the best life as sort of happy life, and
Mm,
just that, then I think it would be a bit of a dead end, because feelings as they are, they come and go, the good ones and the bad ones, which is actually not a bad thing, that they don't
mm,
stay with us for too long, so they're transient. And if we're just after these feelings, then we can find ourselves sort of constantly searching and pursuing these, and it can leave us exhausted. So very often it's more than the feeling. It's something more longer lasting, and with a meaning. So we want to get to that a little bit later on when we talk about the best life. But just thinking about, I suppose, the fact that right now we live in the Western world, at least, sort of we live with quality of life or conditions of living that have never been better in kind of human history. Yet still we find ourselves kind of deeply unhappy. Maybe 1/3 of all of us will at some point experience issues with low mood, anxiety, stress. We get really overwhelmed, and if it was down to sort of just those comforts or things that in terms of material goods are available to us, I suppose we'd see much more happiness, and much more of a sense of living that good life or best life. And we don't. And as psychotherapists, I guess we often ask ourselves, so what is it to do with that? We kind of crave certain things, and we maybe end up with still lacking. And what comes to mind is the fact that with our brains, we are not wired to experience kind of just pleasure and positive sensations. We're wired to survive still. All these centuries later, thousands of years later, we still have a brain which is very powerful in terms of detecting dangers, risks, and keeping us on a kind of feet and toes even, to prevent the harm from coming to us so that we can survive. So when you think about it, like it's really tricky to allow ourselves to relax because the brain is always on alert. And these days, although in terms of what we have available to us, the feelings still don't necessarily shift with that, because we could still feel at risk or under some sort of threat. And what often happens is, we have sort of social media in front of us, and on the social media we kind of look at other people. We have access to a lot of information about others, and we can be quite selective sometimes, just sort of looking at other lives of others and thinking, wow, they're really good, that kind of grass is always greener on the other side, sense of not quite succeeding ourselves. And our brain will process that, and our brain will start sort of telling us, okay, oh, you're not doing very well, you could be rejected, don't let this happen, do something. So we end up with those kind of very, well, photogenic, I suppose, lives where we kind of try to show our best side or best experiences, maybe to others, but we end up at some point kind of in the evening scrolling through sort of different feeds and thinking quite overwhelmed that we are not quite there, because deep inside we feel like something is still missing. We want something a bit more to also reduce the unhappiness, because that's two different things. When you think about it, being happy is an added kind of, it's almost like a bonus to your status quo, to your kind of feeling all right, but maybe not excited or particularly happy about anything, but at least you're not experiencing the unhappiness. This could be somebody who, let's say, has everything, as let's say a woman that has a very good job, has a great house, has a great family, everyone is healthy, but she still doesn't feel quite worthy. And these critical thoughts, they keep coming up, and they keep sort of saying, well, they'll still laugh at you, they'll still think you're not doing so well, and the sense of making sure that you satisfy these critical thoughts, it becomes that search for compensating for it, which can in itself take people very far away from where they ultimately want to be, and how they want to feel happy.
So it sounds that it's unrealistic to look for permanently positive feelings. It sounds like, it's very, very natural for feelings to come and go, whether these are positive feelings and happy feelings, or whether that's difficult, distressing ones. It's very natural for them to come and go. And I'm wondering whether, when we try to look for the best life and we try to achieve living the best life, we're looking for that permanence that's so unrealistic, to permanently feel positive feelings and to also avoid all the distressing ones. So it sounds like it will be really helpful if we accept the nature of the feelings, that it's temporary and they don't last forever.
Yeah. So to I suppose to achieve that very sort of understanding or sense that you've just mentioned, what is good to do is to look at sort of the best life or happiness as something that is to do with the meaning we give our life, our experiences, and the values that we observe as a way of living, or a direction in life that we want to follow, and that creates that kind of rich, full, meaningful life that is the best life ultimately. It will have feelings, it will have positive and negative experiences, or we will have those experiences, because life always comes with ups and downs, and there will be pain, and the more space, I suppose, we have for these feelings without trying to fight them, will help us to get to the more kind of balanced and fulfilling rich life. So we talk a lot about values when it comes to experiencing the best life. So it's about setting yourself on the right direction, about thinking what is important to you and how you can live your life, because very often when you think about it, I suppose we don't necessarily live our own life, being from very young age exposed to perhaps other people's sort of ideas or values, and and often what's kind of norm becomes normal. We don't question these things, and then we just kind of live the life. But we are very good at just living our lives. We are automated to an extent when it comes to doing daily things, going to work, having food. Sometimes we can't even remember what we've had for lunch. It's an hour later. So it's that kind of sense of, okay, stopping and reflecting. What is important to me deep inside? What matters? That what relationships do I want to have? How do I want to feel about myself? All of that comes under this umbrella of valued kind of living and having a direction.
Absolutely. And I really like the point that you made earlier about where threat is coming from in the modern world. So it sounds like in the past we might have had more physical threats to manage. But now in the modern world, the threats are coming from our own mind and our own thoughts. And a lot of the time it's mental images or thoughts that cross our minds rather than physical threats that we have to protect ourselves from. I found that really interesting.
Absolutely. And it's one of the biggest traps, because we don't necessarily see it straight away. It's something that it takes, it often takes people a while to recognize that a lot of it is that kind of mental, habitual mind activity generating thoughts about all sorts of things. And we don't have to respond to all of them. We can select what has meaning to us and what is that kind of automated process that is unhelpful.
Yeah. And you mentioned some thinking styles that I see a lot in therapy with people, like comparing ourselves to others. And social media definitely don't really help in that area, because they give us more and more opportunities to do that, or having strict rules about the expectations of the society and of other people, rather than what we really want to do and how we want to live our lives. I was thinking, how do people know that they've lost direction in life? I was thinking some clinical examples from my work. When people tend to talk about feeling confused, feeling internally conflicted, and I think they often describe that conflict between what they want to do and what they should be doing, what's expected of them, expected by their families, their culture, society. I think these are important factors to consider. So they often feel that conflict, and sometimes this conflict leads to the dissatisfaction in life and the depression and the anxiety that we see in people who come and see us for therapy. And the thoughts a lot of the time are self-critical thoughts, the thoughts that I should be doing better, I'm not meeting the expectations because I'm not married by now, I don't have a child by now, I don't have the best job that I could have by now. And I'm wondering sometimes whether that's actually what people really, really want, or whether that's what's expected of them, and they feel that pressure to act on these expectations, no matter whether that's going to bring satisfaction into their lives or not.
Absolutely. And when you notice that you've been struggling for a while, you've been trying to achieve some goals, and it's been very difficult to find the satisfaction from it all, then I guess this is a good time to stop and pause and think a little bit about what's important, and almost have that period of reflection that takes you to a little bit of a deeper meaning, where you actually think about what is it that I stand for, what is it that I want my life to represent, what are the important things in my life, important people.
So a couple of things that I'd like to share from my own experience, and I would like you to tell me whether you find that in your work as well, is that sometimes I see people being active in only one or two life areas, and they might have identified values in these areas, let's say their work, or physical health. They might look after themselves and they might have a job that they really, really enjoy. However, the fact that their life is quite limited to one or two life areas can be really unhelpful. So I tend to encourage people to look at other life areas, like relationships, as you said, or connection with friends and family, parenting, if that's the case, recreation, offering to the community. A lot of the time we feel a great sense of satisfaction when we offer to other people and when we help
Absolutely.
others. So I'm wondering whether that's also important to look at the range of life areas that we are actually active, um, apart from also, thinking about our values and what's really important to us. Is it important to stay in touch with different parts of our identity and stay active in a range of life areas?
Absolutely. It's a multi-dimensional sort of system of values, I guess, that we are talking about, because um, yes, when you think about the starting point, perhaps it's good to identify sort of around 4 different areas
Okay.
to do with different aspects of our life. And
Mm-hmm.
very often it's something along the lines of, yes, our well-being, whether sort of health, mental health,
Sure.
self-development, self-awareness, sort of working on that. Then we obviously have relationships, and we're not meant to live in this world alone. A child being
Mm-hmm.
born cannot survive being alone. So we are very much all about relationships with others,
Mm-hmm.
and even if the numbers are limited, then still the quality of these relationships is very important in everybody's life, because we all have our attachment system where from the time when we're born, we have that template for how to react to other people, how to relate to them, and and it's a part of our DNA. We can't just
Mm-hmm.
sort of ignore that area of our life. So that's another one that's often very important. Then absolutely that kind of care about our surroundings, as in nature. Whether it's the love of animals, or environment, or something that's there, that was there before us, it will be here after us,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of greater good as well, like you've mentioned, being charitable, or thinking about the bigger picture with the community, and for some people it's kind of their spiritual needs, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
religion, or some other aspects of that side of life. um,
Absolutely.
it then creates that whole kind of puzzle of
Yeah.
the whole map, if you like, with the different directions that come together and align in a certain way.
Mm. So you talk about the values as an umbrella, and then the different goals as specific aims, specific tasks that we can work towards, that it would be great if they're in line with our values. And these chances are it's going to bring us more satisfaction in life. I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with people who feel quite lost and quite confused because they've been following the rules, the social rules for so many years, or their family rules and what their
Mm-hmm.
parents might have expected of them, that they're not really sure what their values are. So sometimes I ask them to reflect on what they tend to enjoy, what tends to give them a sense of
Mm-hmm.
satisfaction, and then work on this the other way around, starting from the goals and trying to work out, when you do that task,
Mm-hmm.
what is it really that gives you the sense of satisfaction? What gives you that sense of feeling complete, feeling happy, feeling a sense of achievement?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how we try to rebuild the values, really. Is that something that you find as well with certain people?
Absolutely. Some would say that at the moment we are in this very particular situation with what is going on in the world, that perhaps there is some kind of sort of awakening happening with people, where we just start to notice the smaller things, because our
Mm,
routines have been broken, and we kind of look at things with maybe a fresh pair of eyes. We start noticing how we miss certain things that we never really appreciated, or thought much about, and
mm,
that sensitivity that's created to all of that, starts to make us feel like we're missing certain things, and that tells us we value them as well. So it's a
absolutely.
good start to explore these ideas a bit more, and feel grateful, and feel compassionate, and experience the feelings that very often actually um, are a part of the valued directions, and come
Mhm.
more often when we are on track with our lives.
Sure, absolutely. And it sounds that for certain people it takes a lot of courage to work out their values. It takes maybe experimenting or going out of their comfort zone in order to come closer to what is really, really important to them and closer to who they are as people. Because I guess
Mm.
if you're used to following someone else's ideal and someone else's rules and expectations, then it feels really, really hard to give yourself permission to shift that.
Mm. Or to feel satisfied because you are not living your life. You're not kind of the best version of yourself either, because you're just
Mm.
continuing with a certain script, and scripts can be very, very powerful. It can be something that really dominates our life and very easily takes over in a way that we don't even notice this is happening.
In situations where our interpersonal world becomes a source of distress for us, what would you encourage people to do? One thing that goes through my mind is being brave enough to accept that that's the problem, because I think a lot of the
Mm.
time, if we're close to people that can be a source of distress for us, we might deny it for such a long time because we think, it's my mother, for instance, or it's my husband. How can I feel this way? And we don't give permission to ourselves to just accept reality and look at the problem and identify it as such.
Mhm.
So maybe the first step is to notice what's happening, notice what type of behaviors can lead to certain feelings in ourselves, and then
Mhm.
give permission to ourselves to just stay with the feeling a little bit longer, and start thinking what we can do to improve it. A lot of the time, we don't even give permission to ourselves to notice these patterns and accept
Mm.
that they can be problematic.
In interpersonal psychotherapy, for instance, we work with exactly that, the relationship between the interpersonal functioning and depression. And it's a very strong one because of our attachment systems, because of the sense of satisfaction that naturally relationships kind of have uh, the role to play when it comes to meeting these needs. Um, we try to work on it in different ways, but one of the ways is kind of definitely improving communication,
Mm,
because without that, it's easy just to really miss each other.
mhm,
And one of the first things that I work on with my clients is for them to start seeing different perspectives. So almost see it as like, traveling on a movie set, traveling with the camera and looking at things from different angles before we
mhm.
kind of pick the final shot.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
And it's looking at okay, so if you in this situation are thinking this, what might somebody else be thinking? And then it's less personal, and then it helps to create that distance to implement some kind of action that has the potential to change things for the better. In terms of the source of distress when it comes from other people, um, and from within, very often there's a big overlap, because unfortunately, sort of very often when we are growing up and we experience sort of as a child some communications at home, or the way being brought up by our parents, who very often just want absolute best for us, but may not necessarily um, communicate it in that way or convey it in that way. We learn to think about ourselves in certain ways that are very often, like we talked about earlier, critical and unforgiving, and that throughout our life, if it's not addressed, very often these patterns of thinking kind of only strengthen. and
Mm,
um, and to take a step back and really recognize that perhaps it's not always as I think. Is my thoughts are not always true.
mm,
It takes a lot. It takes a lot of practice to even notice, and then even more practice to do something about it, to really start changing these patterns. Um,
mm,
when the main relationship in our life is with our caregivers, what we very often see happen is is that the way that our parents are towards us, we learn that this is the way to treat ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And how we respond to our parents is often then the way that we act towards others in our
Mm-hmm.
adult lives. So that's a very
Mm-hmm.
big shortcut, of course. But if somebody is criticized a lot or even abused as a child, then very often they take that role on themselves to then be very self-critical, very harsh with themselves. You know, people take out on themselves a lot of it as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you then saw your parent as somebody who's, who can hurt you, but whom you still love, it could be that this template for attachment is replicated in later life by creating
Mm-hmm.
relationships or entering relationships where we are intimately close with somebody who hurts us. And in this way, kind of it goes on, and it's difficult for this pattern to break it.
We see that very frequently. This either psychological or even physical abuse and other forms of abuse that might happen during our childhood. And we can see clearly how this then affects people's views of themselves and the world and their future. However, what I want to say is that a lot of the time I see people who suffer from anxiety and depression, and when I ask the question, how was your childhood?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any stressful experiences, or what was your relationship with your parents like? They jump into, the answer of, I had a happy childhood, and I don't understand why I started feeling this way, because, my parents treated
Mm-hmm.
me perfectly. I felt safe. So a lot of the time we find that, it can be abuse or it can be neglect that leads to these
Mm-hmm.
problematic views of ourselves. But other times it can be overprotection, or it can be
Yeah.
caring too much, not allowing opportunities for a child to make decisions, to be able to face their own mistakes and learn how to cope with it, to face and
Yeah.
cope with failures. That's equally important. And sometimes people don't take that into consideration, that it can be overprotective and very caring parents that
Mm-hmm.
communicate their feelings in such a way that it might not be very helpful either. So that's another, I
Mm.
guess, situation and possibility to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of low mood and depression, we know that there are different sort of predisposing factors as such. So
Mm,
it's not only the early formative years, but it could also be a mixture of kind of genes or chemical sort of imbalance that needs to be addressed, or later life losses where
sure.
purely through a loss we experience that our life or world just falls apart, and then it creates that void that is always with us. So, but a lot of the time, there will be a voice somewhere in our head that kind of got recorded and is played on repeat, whether it's parents or whether it's a teacher at school or some kind
Mm,
of bullying that goes on that gets kind of then repeatedly reminded in our head, that creates these later kind of states of self-criticism and
mhm.
reduced self-compassion.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thinking about, these discussions around living our best life, it sounds like this is a very big trap. It sounds like the harder we try to work towards achieving that, the bigger the problem that we create for ourselves.
Well, if we are on an automated pilot, if we're not
Mm,
regaining kind of manual control where we actually develop self-awareness, where we kind of follow the old patterns, or just understand that the ultimate goal as good feelings, sort of
mhm.
pleasure or some kind of maybe shorter lasting satisfaction, then yes, we'll find that it's a bit of a dead end. A very good sort of very quick exercise that I love using is when you ask somebody to think that they are kind of, let's say, 90-year-old now, you know, project themselves into the future, and being this age, you want them to ask themselves, you know, if you could go back in time, then what you do differently from now on would be dots, dots, dots. So it really inspires you to think about life as something that, you know, is precious, is limited, and yet we still can you know, change so much. So why wait till tomorrow? Let's start working on it now. And that kind of committed action and value directions, like we said, I think this is ultimately the life best lived and the best version of ourselves. That's what kind of are the huge components of both of these.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mags, for being here with us today and for talking about a topic that touches us all. We all, I guess, find that conflict from time to time between what we want and what's really important to us and what we are expected to be doing, what we should be doing. And it's really important to think about it and break it down even more. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise.
Thank you very much, Idyli.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.